Hey everyone, welcome back to Dev Radio, where we're bringing you really cool interviews with cloud solution architects from Microsoft. Today we have Mark Gardner. He's going to talk to us about site reliability engineering. I have to admit, it's a term I've heard in the past, Mark, but I'm not terribly familiar with it. So, Mark, I'm just going to give you the floor, and I might ask a couple questions here and there, but I'm more than anything interested in listening today.
Sure. Yeah. So site reliability engineering is this buzzword that's really popped up over the last decade or so. It rose to prominence almost in parallel with like DevOps, and a lot of times you'll hear them kind of used like interchangeably, which isn't really the case. So DevOps really is sort of I refer to it as like sort of a philosophy for how we relate between the software, the products that we're building, and the end users that are using them. And it's really sort of these general principles that you can use to sort of shape that pipeline for the delivery of those products, or manage that relationship between your end users and your products. Site reliability engineering takes a lot of the broad strokes of DevOps, but then builds this prescriptive framework on top of it for how you can actually manage your applications. And as the name would imply too, right? Like it's focused very much on a particular aspect of an application's lifecycle, and that being the reliability of the product itself. So kind of an example of that, right? So DevOps talks about like, building automation and measuring key metrics, right? But it doesn't really specifically measure or mention what those metrics are. Site reliability engineering, though, is very specific about measuring like particular metrics of the application. So things like reliability being or availability, right? Like we talk about numbers of nines. So site reliability has like very prescriptive measures that it expects you to keep up. And then it also has it has some really interesting models for how you can sort of manage the reliability of your application or your products. Things that it measures like error budgets and toil budgets, which are sort of these really interesting concepts where they apply sort of like economic theory to basically the workflow pipeline to kind of balance out sort of feature development, the ability to deliver, the thing that actually makes the product valuable, like what your business wants from the product, balance that against like the actual end user experience and making sure that you're still delivering something that's worth having, right? That the customer is actually going to enjoy using the product. That's sort of like in a nutshell at a very high level. How I would describe the two things and how they relate to one another.
Yeah, and that's interesting you say that, because DevOps, you're right, it's this very philosophical, open, and almost a dangerously vague thing, whereas SRE definitely sounds more concrete and specific. That's just in the terms of something like Microsoft's Azure ecosystem. Like, how does SRE make things more concrete than the magical DevOps way of thinking of saying, okay, just automate everything and your company will be better tomorrow?
Right. So first, I want to take an opportunity to quip a little bit on. So whenever I'm talking about DevOps, I always make sure to like draw a line between the philosophy of DevOps,
right,
and the product, right? Because I used to always be able to say, well, you can't go out and buy DevOps until you named a product, and then you could go out and buy DevOps, right? But that doesn't actually. But you're right, right? Like just automating stuff doesn't actually solve your problem. Like people, you can automate bad processes, and they're still bad processes, and they don't actually make your software better or make the experience of developing your software any better. So site reliability engineering really actually tries to attack that problem. And again, by being like specific in measuring like outcomes of things. So kind of the idea, all right, so DevOps, a frequent pattern, right, is teams will implement sort of like a DevOps engineer or like an automation engineer who's sort of responsible for like building the CI/CD pipeline and managing the delivery, kind of the delivery aspects of the software development phase.
Yeah, of course.
Right. So site reliability engineering actually really creates this whole other team And it can be a different team. Sometimes it can just be another role within the team itself. But it's basically this entire, like, segmenting the responsibility for making sure that the application, that somebody is actually looking out for the end user experience. Like, is the application, delivering features is all great and everything, but we really want to focus on making sure that we don't do that to the detriment of the stability of the platform. Yeah. Because you can have, like, the most amazing product in the world, but if its reliability, like if it's only available 50% of the time, then what's the point in that? You're not actually getting any value out of it, because nobody's ever going to use that. So there's this balancing act, right? And site reliability engineering is really focused on sort of empowering this other role or this other team of individuals to make sure that they have the ability to focus on that responsibility. And so they actually are stakeholders in the product themselves. Like, they have ownership in the backlog. Like, they can prioritize. So we talked about, like I mentioned, error budgets in passing. But error budgets are this mechanism in which the SRE team can say, feature development has degraded the stability of the platform beyond an acceptable threshold. And at this point, we are going to deprioritize feature development and instead increase the priority of stability or technical debt burn down in the backlog. And so they actually have the ability to go back into the backlog of the development team and say, no, those stories are no longer actually the most important. Instead, these are the most important, because we have to get our metrics back up. We have to get the reliability of the application back up, fix the user experience, and get our customers happy again before we can go on and deliver any of those new features. And so that's sort of like one of the really, like, core and like powerful tenets of site reliability engineering, something that doesn't really exist in, like, the DevOps space.
That makes a lot of sense to me. It answers that grand ethereal question: are we adding value? And it also makes me think of the whole example someone gave me once, that DevOps, the philosophy, gives you the toolbox, and in some ways the DevOps will give you the toolbox, but we're not all carpenters right away. Right. You have to actually train in your discipline. You have to be an apprentice. You have to learn the processes. And so SRE sounds like, to me, is giving us those processes so we can answer that question very concretely. Are we adding value? And minimize things that don't add value, but may add complexity to our project.
Right. Yeah. It's so again, I made the comparison. Yeah, you said it very succinctly. The DevOps is philosophy, whereas SRE is a prescriptive model. Like, it actually gives you, so DevOps is sort of like, here are the steps that you go through in building a house, right? SRE is, here are the floor plans, here's the lumber package, here are the tools. Just go. Now you just need to actually go and build it, right? Right. So it gives you a lot of those tools. Now, that being said, just like anything else in the software development world, everybody sort of puts their own spin on it. So some things, some companies will follow. So if we go back into the history of SRE was originally kind of coined in the original model was developed by Google. Back 2012-ish roundabouts. And they published sort of the SRE handbook, which was the foundational kind of manifest of how the practice was shaped. Since then, it's been adopted, modified, adjusted by many different organizations. And so some of those tenets have, of course, changed based on, like, different circumstances. So, the kind of the point is, there's still, like, core SRE, but depending on, like, what it is that you're trying to do and how your business operates, like what your business value stream looks like, some practices may be more or less applicable, and you might find that you do SRE a little bit different from somebody else. The one trend that I see happening right now with a lot of companies that is the most concerning, that I would, anybody who's watching this that's interested, I would, like, steer them away from, is this idea that SRE is just a rebranding of traditional IT ops. I see that happening everywhere. I see a lot of companies just take their existing operations teams and they just change their titles to SRE, and they're like, cool, we've got SRE now, guys. And that is absolutely not like, that's not the same thing. Not, you know, SRE is not the same thing as operations. And one of the points that I always make about this is that, so SREs, not to speak ill of like operation teams, like, you know, I have a great appreciation for ops teams. In my past, they have, you know, ensured that I have been able to sleep soundly at night many times after deploying code that probably I should have tested a little bit better. But like SRE is actually one of the ways that it's different from operations is that SRE engineers tend to be very highly skilled individuals that that are expected to have a very broad and very deep knowledge of the entire application stack around a particular product. And the reason being that, you know, they need to, again, their priority is like customer experience or end user experience of the product, right? So whenever there's an issue, they need to be able to like dive in and dig down and find where that issue is. And that could be anywhere. Like that could be in the network layer, that could be in the caching layer, that could be in the presentation layer, like the client-side JavaScript or something like that. So like that's a very broad span of things that you need to actually have very deep technical knowledge that you can like dig in and find. And so like in your traditional operations model, like those guys typically don't have a lot of awareness of the actual application stack. Like they tend to be very focused on just like the infrastructure, like reboot the server kind of scenarios, right? And that's just because that's the world that they're coming from. So rebranding those people as SREs is putting all of this additional expectation on top of them without necessarily skilling them up and giving them the ability to serve those needs. So like that's definitely like when I see companies trying to do that, like I immediately raise the flag. I'm like, you are going to have a very bad experience going down this path. Both from like a business stakeholder perspective and just like that operation team is going to be miserable because they're not going to actually understand what it is that they're being asked to do.
So Mark, I'm kind of glad you gave that warning because that's going to encourage people who are watching this to go study SRE and determine, you know, what they need to do to implement it in their organization. So I know you shared with me links that we're going to put in the description box on this YouTube video. Matt, Mark, this has been great. I'm glad that both of you are on today. Mark, we're going to definitely have to get you back to talk a lot more about this, about the actual metrics and how we monitor those. So, you know, talk through some real world scenarios. But thank you again for all of this knowledge you shared with us today.
Yeah, you're absolutely welcome. I'd be happy to come back anytime.
Yeah, thanks so much. I know a lot more about SRE now.
There you go. All right. Again, thank you everybody for joining on, and just subscribe to Dev Radio if you want to see more interviews with other CSAs, or if you want to see Mark come on again, leave us some comments. Let us know. We'll definitely jump on again. So we'll see you all next time.
All right.